name is Kim Long. I'm a retired Presbyterian minister, professor of worship, and editor. I was really pleased to be asked to write the essay on celebrating communion because as my life of faith and my vocational life has evolved through the years, I have become more and more grateful for the way God has given us the word, the gospel, not only through the words of Scripture, but also through these acts that we do together, these sacramental acts, baptism and communion. My family and I once worshiped at a church that set up bread machines all around the sanctuary on a communion Sunday. The idea was that as you anticipated going to the Lord's table, you would smell the aroma of breaking bread. Your senses were heightened, as was your eagerness to get to the table. There was often bread left over after worship, and if you were really lucky, you got to take one of those loaves home. So one Sunday was my lucky day. I got handed this loaf of bread. It was still warm, and even though I had gone to the table, now I was getting really hungry. And I was carrying this loaf of bread like it was a baby. So I got it out to my car and may or may not have buckled that loaf into the front seat and started the drive home. I turned onto the road that would take me to the interstate, and I saw two men on the sidewalk. It was heartbreaking, really, because I knew I was going to have to give up this loaf of bread. I really, really wanted this bread. But it was clear that these two people needed it more than I did. There was a younger man sitting on the sidewalk up against the wall, and maybe 20 feet from him, an older man. They didn't have pieces of cardboard, they didn't have backpacks, they didn't have anything. So I pulled over to the curb and lowered my window and beckoned to the younger man. He sprang up and came over, and I held the loaf of bread out my window. I said, "This is for you and the older gentleman to share." He thanked me, and then I watched as he went over to the other man, bent over, broke the bread, and gave him half. There it was right before me. Communion on the street. Take, bless, break, give. He was like a priest right there on the sidewalk. When Jesus said, "Do this in remembrance of me," he didn't break the bread and then feed himself. He fed other people. To celebrate communion is not only to remember Christ's death and Christ's resurrection, but it's also to make present his ministry of feeding. It's to remember the meals that he shared with his disciples and the meals that he shared after he was raised. To celebrate communion is not only to be fed ourselves and nourished for our life, but it's also to participate and continue Jesus' own feeding ministry. And in doing so, we are rehearsing for the coming reign of God, where everyone is welcomed and everyone is fed.